Hello, everyone. Welcome to Royal Black and Elite. I'm so excited that you could join me today. Once a week, I try to do a crime story, and I think this week's is going to be very interesting. There was a show a few years ago called Queen of the South. Put a like there if you ever seen this before. It was about this young lady here, Teresa, and she was the boss of a cartel. Now, usually when you hear about stories like this, it's usually at Latina, especially if it's a woman Latina who the story is about. But do you know in South Africa, there was a woman whose name was also Queen of the South? They also called her Moni. Her name was Simone Jasmine, and she ran one of the biggest cartels in South Africa. So I think you're going to find her story very interesting, as it didn't quite end like Teresa's ended. So I think you're going to find that her story was a bit more well, we'll talk about it. So, everybody, I hope that y'all are having a great day. I thank you all for tuning in, logging in. You all are the best. So, let's talk about South Africa. And, South Africa is a huge continent. And so, when we look at Durban, Durban is right over here on the right side, here on the, like, they're on the edge. And that's where she grew up, actually, in a place called Wentworth, which is a suburb of Durban. She was born into a very challenging environment where there were very few opportunities and crime was really high and poverty was even worse. Now, the media says that she came to power in the game, as we say, as a girlfriend. So she used to go with this guy, just like on Queen of the South. Even also like Miss Sinclair's story, who was the queen there in Harlem. Definitely click down below to continue to learn more. But evidently, she was with this guy and he was unalived. So it kind of thrust her into the forefront as far as what his business was. So, it really, if you watch Queen of the South, I think you'll be looking at her life, except the ending was much different. Now, there in her city of, region of Durban, it was a very poor area and substances ruled the city. And, when you look at her, she just looks like a roundaway girl. She does, a lot of times they make Africans and South Africa and Africa in general seem like it's just poor and everybody has distended bellies and everybody drinking from wells and hungry. But to me, she looks like what LL Cool J used to call a roundaway girl. So she looks very normal, but that's not the picture they want you to see. They want you to see something different. And I want to just say real quickly, they do want you to see something different even here on our channels. We are being inundated with all of these AI videos, y'all, and they can create these videos in 10 seconds. They want to do away with us creators. So I just can't thank you all enough for sticking with me. I'm going to keep turning out content. And when you hear those AI voices, would you click off and come on back to Royal Black and Elite and listen, because we're real people and you all are making a difference by watching our channel. So I appreciate you all for tuning in. So, from these modest beginnings, Jasmine didn't remain a foot soldier. So after she kind of took over, she built a network operating out of Lansdowne Road Barracks. This was a complex in Wentworth, and she led her gang, and she called them simply the cartel. According to the police and community sources, she was making at her height $200,000 a day. She invested in assets like properties. She had a fleet of vehicles, and they even said she gave back to her community. They said she paid bills, she helped struggling residents, she handed out food, she sponsored children's pantries and jump houses, and she even gave school uniforms. So some people really loved her, but some people didn't like her because she was in the game. And in the game, there is going to be violence. And there was. There were rival gangs. There were always people fighting back and forth. And her biggest rival gangs was the Hollywood gang, the Drain Rats, G Section, and the Destroyers. These are grown people, y'all, with these names, okay? I'm just giving to you like it is. And this is the community that these people were living in. This kind of looked like Chicago. I just want you to see a picture of how the people were living when she was at the top of her game, quote unquote. Now, though the people did love her, there were people who did not like her, and the law enforcement liked her even less. a lot of her subordinates, the people who were right under her, they started getting arrested. And so her people, who used to protect her, that began to go down and she began to lose her power. Not only that, Natal's anti-gang unit, they launched an operation aimed at the Wentworth gangs. So that also really kind of brought her power down. Plus, the people who had been in the police force who were protecting her, they began to be implicated. People began to find out they were dirty. So that happened to her as well. So the police were coming in on one side. The rivals were coming in on the other. And her people who were protecting her were beginning to leave. So this young lady at this time was only 35 years old. Now, mind you, when she took over this racket, it was in 2018. So 2 years later in 2020, not very, very long, she met an unfortunate and brutal, really, end. So listen, so she was, ruling and everything, and she had invested in these businesses, and they said some was the fleet of vehicles, some say were Ubers and cabs. So we don't know if this was one of the cabs that she owned, but on October the 28th, one night, she climbed into an Uber or a cab. And reports say, all of a sudden, as soon as she got in, and they say this was on the corner of Marine Drive and Blackpool Road in Bluff, Durban. Are any of you all from Durban? Do you all know where that is? Have you ever heard of Jasmine? Such an interesting story because she's only 35 years old. And like I said, we don't hear these stories in America. But y'all, Black people have lives all around the world. And this young lady's life was ended in a dramatic fashion that night. You see, according to police and news sources, these pow men jumped out. They had staked out our house supposedly for a few days. So they jumped out and opened the car door before I guess the driver got a chance to lock it or anything. And they began to fire their pows. Jasmine was unfortunately hit like 6 times. They said to the chest and stomach and leg, just everywhere. And by the time she made it to the hospital, she had succumbed to her wounds in the emergency room. They said the driver took off and ran away, but he did come back and take her to the hospital. So she did, her demise was there. To this day, you all, no one, and I do mean no one, has ever been charged with her unaliving. So that was the end of Jasmine. She was a divisive figure. Some people loved her because she gave back to the community, and some people really had a lot against her because the many lives that because of what she did in the industry that she was in were lost because of these gang battles. Her substance of choice that she liked to deal in this area in South Africa, evidently, as reports say, is real big around this particular substance, which was the substance that you put in your arm. So that's the substance that she sold. So I want to thank you all so much for tuning in today for today's lecture. As you know, my lectures are always for entertainment and educational purposes only, and the Fair Act to Use is in effect. Now, as you know, all of this is alleged, but I will give you my sources. I read from the Ocean's Vibe, the Herald News, and the Citizen. So I thank you all for joining me. You all continue to click down below and learn more about our royal black and elite history. And I want to thank you again for rocking with me, a real person. Y'all, when you press like, when you share, when you comment, that pushes the video through the algorithm. Would you do that for me? If you enjoyed this video, if you learned a little bit more about Black people around the world, this woman was a multi-millionaire. She passed away, no children, no husband, no nothing, but she made her money dirty. So I just wanted to share that story with you, and I appreciate you supporting me. I'll see you on another great episode of Royal Black.